cricket world. Now the rule seems coming.
Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 54 of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. My name is Mashal St. Patrick Hewitt, one half of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, and I'm not doing the usual intro today. Santoki is not with us today. He's on holiday, but the show must go on. We promised you that there would be one final episode before 2021 came to a close. It's one we actually wanted to record. It was supposed to be the original episode 53, but we've moved it forward to episode 54. And this is going to be an interesting one. It's going to be a really interesting one. Some of the best episodes we do on the Caribbean Cricket Podcast are kind of what I call niche topics away from a specific focus around specifically Caribbean cricket, but is related and does have an impact on Caribbean cricket. And for those who've been following on the socials, Instagram, Twitter, etc., you all know what this one's about. And I am pleased to introduce today's guest. If you're watching on the visuals, you can already see. If you're listening on the audios, let me do the intro. I'm pleased to introduce Tom Dunmore, VP for marketing related to Major League Cricket, minor league cricket in the United States. And before I ask Tom to come in, I'm fairly certain some of you are going to say, USA, why are you doing a show related to the United States and cricket? If you listen to our last episode and some of our most recent live shows, you'll remember that Santoki and I have been talking about the US market, the growing US market. And in fact, this episode is highly pertinent because USA Cricket and West Indies Cricket recently announced that the 2024 World Cup will be a joint World Cup. It is not just a specific West Indian World Cup. We are joining with the States to host that particular World Cup. And it's important that the listeners of this podcast, those who pertain to be West Indian fans, we have to understand what our friends across the water are doing with regards to cricket, because I do believe it will have a major impact on our cricket in more ways than one. But Tom, how are you doing? Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Really pleased to be on here. Big fan of the pod. I'm sure everyone says that, but in my case, it's true. I love listening to it. So delighted to be on and talk about some American cricket with the Caribbean context.
Lovely. And the first thing you've got to do, Tom, because with all due respect, I'm fairly certain by the end of this episode, everyone's going to know everything. But as we start this episode, I'm fairly certain that most people listening will be like, okay, I'm locked in. I want to hear what this is about, but we're going to have to go from the beginning. Who is Tom Dunmore? Tell me in your own words, who are you and what do you do?
Yeah. I'll keep it quick because I don't like talking about myself, but I am English. So my earliest cricket memories are watching the West Indies demolish England in cricket. So, the beat goes on as an England fan. Not been much fun lately, but I've been living in the US for 21 years or so. Came over here not to work in cricket by any means. Just went to grad school in Chicago and stuck around, and then ended up working in sport, in soccer as we call it here first, and then in motorsports with the Indy 500. And then got the chance to join Major League Cricket and help this venture. Just joined this year. It's something I didn't expect because, like many of your listeners, as you said in the intro, cricket in America aren't necessarily two words you put together all of the time. But that's what's exciting about this for me. We get to build this from the grassroots. We're a startup league, a startup business, in fact, and really we're not just launching Major League Cricket as another franchise T20 league, but we're really helping build the whole sport, developing it in terms of infrastructure, player development, helping USA Cricket, grow the quality of the national team, build the minor league structure that I'm sure we'll talk about, academies, and introduce the sport to a new American audience, explaining what cricket is, why it's one of the world's greatest games, if not the greatest, and also speaking to the millions of cricket fans that do live in the US. We it's funny to say it, but we have one of the largest cricket fan bases in the world in the United States, because this country is so large and because we have so much immigration from cricket-loving countries, from South Asia and from the Caribbean. So we know there's a massive audience for the sport here. There are a lot of players, recreational players, and in fact, some very good professional players that often play here in tournaments and have taken part in our minor league. Again, I'm sure we'll chat about that. So for me to have that opportunity as someone who grew up loving cricket, I lived just down the road from Sussex County Cricket Club and was a member there. And to have the chance to build the sport and introduce it to an American audience, I loved helping soccer grow. And a couple of decades ago, soccer was much more of a nascent sport than it is now in the US. And I think the same is true of cricket. We have a steeper road to climb. We're not kidding ourselves, but there's also an incredible upside to the potential for the sport here with the amount of fans we have and the way that Americans can adopt and develop sports. And I think it's a good time to do that in many ways, following the immigration patterns and with the opportunity to co-host the World Cup with the West Indies in less than 3 years. So there's all the pieces are there, and I'm just really privileged to have a chance to play a small part in it.
Love that intro, Tom, and I really mean that, because you've touched on, just in that intro, you've touched on nearly all the different things I want to get into across this episode. And anyone who's listening now or watching on YouTube, I hope already you're like, okay, I'm locked in now. I'm definitely locked in. Let's see where this is going. I was going to start somewhere else, but now I've decided to change my mind, because as a cricket fan, when you first got to the States, and let me give the context for why I'm saying this, Tom. I was saying to you off air before we started that probably our number one fan base for the podcast is actually in the States. It's not in the Caribbean. The States and the UK are kind of neck and neck. But the reason why the States and the UK are neck and neck in terms of listening to our pod and everything we do is because we can tap into the diaspora communities. In the UK, it's obviously the Caribbean diaspora community. And in the US, it's both a kind of Asian diaspora community, but obviously a heavy Caribbean diaspora community in the US and in Canada as well, in fairness. And I guess as an expat, you moved to the US. What were you? How many years ago are we talking? 20 odd, did you say?
Yeah, I moved in 2001. So
okay, so 20.
Over 20, yeah.
When you first got there, what cricket did you see? Because I put this out when I put it out on Twitter and said, right, we're going to get Tom on. Any questions? And actually, over on our Instagram handle, we got a few questions that I want to kind of throw in throughout this episode as well. But one of the questions was relating to like recreational sport, cricket as a recreational sport, and I've got lots of relatives in the States, dotted all over the States. I've been to the States multiple times. I can't say, Tom, in all the times that I've ever been to the States, that I ever saw cricket as a pickup game that I just randomly happened to see.
Mm-hmm.
Basketball, soccer, as the Americans would call it, baseball, American football, lacrosse. I'm talking like all the college sports I definitely saw. But cricket, maybe I was in the wrong areas, in fairness, so maybe that's part of the question as well. In terms of if I'd gone to a different part of the States, would I have seen it? But I didn't really see it as a pickup sport, just randomly going through the States. So what's your experience as you've gone through that 20-year journey?
I do think, to your point, it is very region specific and depends very much on where some of the sort of hotspots of those diaspora populations are based. I lived in Chicago for the first 12 years I lived in the US, and there was in fact a pickup cricket match that happened at Washington Park on the south side, which was right next to the university that I went to. So I saw people playing cricket there quite often, which was great to see. And that's a park that's actually hosted cricket for decades, including Ireland, actually, who are in the US this week to play the US in Florida, where I am. They, in fact, played a game there in, I believe, the 1960s or 70s as well. So there's some odd history to American cricket. In fact, there are parks and places in New York and Philadelphia in particular that have been around since the 19th century and still host cricket today. They have some established old clubs that keep playing. But you will find, particularly in places like New York, you will find pickup cricket. You'll find it, in New Jersey, where there are big, South Asian immigrant populations and other hotspots like that. You'll see kids just out there, playing on the streets or playing. So it is happening, and but it's happening certainly at a much faster rate now than 20 years ago when I first moved here, because we've had so much immigration, particularly from South Asia in that time, and that's really been one of the explosions. Population changes in the US over that time period. So we're seeing it grow pretty rapidly. Now that doesn't mean you're going to see it all over the place. It's not really in schools yet. So there's a lot to do, certainly, but we're seeing it more and more. And I certainly hear, anecdotally at least, more from people who say to me, "Oh, I saw some guys playing out somewhere." So it's starting to happen more and more, but it's it's also not the easiest pickup sport, right? Like soccer and basketball are very easy games to play. You just need a hoop and a ball, or just a ball and some jumpers in, soccer's case. So it's a harder sport in that sense. And there's a bigger learning curve for Americans who have never played it to adopt it and start joining in. But we're starting to see it more and more, certainly.
And it's interesting that you mentioned the school system, because that's what I find so fascinating about the idea of a US cricket team. And I don't mean this for anyone, there'll be some US cricket fans who are listening to this. I don't mean this to be derogatory about US cricket. That's not my intention at all. But what I mean is, it's amazing that the US can have a cricket team without the sport established through the school and college system, because at the end of the day, for those who know America well, or know the American sports structure so well, so much comes through the school college system. It's so ingrained in the US psyche, sports through that system, that to have a sport without that is actually quite phenomenal, that the US are able to be on the global stage without that kind of clear pathway and clear structure. Any comments on that, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, that's right, that we haven't been part of that traditional structure, which is critical, and why the US is so strong at so many sports. But I think the fact that we still have a team that's competitive on the world stage, and increasingly so, speaks to both the volume of players that we actually do have here, that will probably surprise people outside the US, that we do have thousands of players that play every week in the US, and many of them are very high standard. A lot of them have come over from the Caribbean, or from South Asia. So, that they've either immigrated here themselves, or now is increasingly the children of immigrants who grew up with cricket, who have played. And what, one of the interesting things about the cricket demographic here is, particularly with the South Asian group, it's relatively quite an affluent group, who often work in tech jobs or things like that. So they do have the means to support private coaching and to get cricket organized, which does take some investment. Clearly, again, it's not a cheap sport to play, at least at a competitive level, because of the pitch and everything that you need. So there are some resources there behind the sport that have helped grow it, and that started to lead to an academy system. We have at Major League Cricket, we have about 15 affiliated youth academies around the country, and some real hotspots where we have a ton of interest and a ton of kids playing. So it is happening increasingly, and that's creating a pipeline of talent. What's not existed before is a structure to then take those kids who are playing when they're younger and give them a more competitive, foundational system to be part of, with good coaching, with regular matches, with the opportunity to play with good pro and semi-pro players. It was very sporadic until really this year, when we launched minor league cricket and had a 10-week tournament that gave that consistent competition and practice sessions, and each team had at least one professional player as well. So they were able to be exposed to best practices and how you prepare to be a professional cricketer, which just hadn't really happened before. So if we're able to put in this structure of development that can create a ladder up to the US national team, that's going to develop those younger kids, give them more opportunities, and we'll see a pretty rapid increase, because the volume of players is growing, We have a bit more work to do on the women's side. I think everyone knows that as well. But there's a big opportunity there because, to your point, there are so many great athletes in the US because school sports is so strong that if we can carve off even a small chunk to play cricket, when they're teenagers or something like that, and they've grown up playing softball or other sports, we can have some very talented female athletes playing cricket as well. So there are lots of opportunities there in the US that are pretty unique because of the demographics, because of the resources, and because of just the volume of it being such a large population, that even when it's a small percentage playing, it's quite large even compared to some other cricket playing nations.
Would it be naive? And again, off air before we started recording, you and I were speaking a bit about MLS and under MLS you've got USL, etc. Would it be naive to say, so MLS is what, probably 20 plus years old now?
Yeah, more than 25 years now.
Yeah. So would it be naive to say that the cricket journey, and we haven't even got into what Major League Cricket is, and I'm about to go there, but would it be naive to say that the cricket journey and start point is where American soccer was at when the inception of MLS came in, or would you say that soccer had a much easy? Well, obviously soccer's in schools, but what I mean is, did soccer have a much easier run in to start up at MLS, or is it a same kind of? Is it a same start point we're trying to establish now? Because when MLS came about, it was effectively trying to unify a divisional structure across the US for a game that hundreds of kids played throughout the US, to the point now where MLS is, at this point in time in 2021, is widely regarded as at least a B level league in terms of, you would expect an MLS All-Stars team. In fact, they regularly play traveling European clubs. You would expect them to be able to compete with a traveling European club quite easily. And obviously the US and obviously the women's were even much better. The US men's national team, the US women's national team are obviously very strong in with regards to soccer. So is that a parallel you can make, or is that the wrong parallel to make?
Yeah, I think you're asking the right person, because I've spent quite a lot of time thinking about this as someone who worked in pro soccer as well here, and obviously grew up with both sports in England. It's different. The two big differences, and there are advantages and disadvantages for cricket. The disadvantage we have versus where soccer was in the early 90s is as we just talked about, we're nowhere near where soccer was in terms of being in schools and colleges and that pathway that exposes so many kids at a young age to soccer here. The recreational, the youth soccer crowd was pretty significant in the US when MLS launched. The negative or the struggles that soccer had actually was, for a decade or so, pro soccer outside of a couple of teams couldn't even figure out how to convert that into attendance or interest in Major League Soccer. In fact, they were probably too focused on the youth soccer and the families as a marketing hinge, and weren't focused enough on getting adults interested in their own terms around the sport of soccer. And so the marketing wasn't quite right for MLS for probably 10 years or so outside of DC and Chicago and a couple of places. So that was a real negative in some ways for soccer. And the fact that soccer is so easy to play in existing American sports venues, which is what allowed soccer to grow easily, both at the youth level and then at the professional level, because you can use existing American football stadiums or even baseball stadiums. That's an advantage, but it's also a disadvantage, because it meant it was too easy for MLS teams and lower league teams to keep playing in venues that weren't suitable really for soccer, even though they were roughly the right dimensions. You had lines on the pitch, or you're playing on bad turf, or you're playing in Arrowhead Stadium, which is at 85,000 venue capacity, when you're the Kansas City Wizards and you're drawing 7,000 people, and it just feels horrible, right? So it took a long time for MLS to make the capital investments it needed to in its own venues to advance the sport. In our case, all those things are sort of flipped. We don't have a massive base of youth players, so we don't see that necessarily as a primary, fan base. We want to develop that fan base over time, but we're not just assuming all these kids are going to. There's millions of kids out there that are going to come out and automatically go to matches or tune in on TV. We instead know we have to appeal to adult fans of cricket and generate new fans of cricket as well. And at the same time, we also have to make massive investments in cricket-specific facilities from the beginning. We can't go in and play in baseball stadiums, at least effectively. It won't be a good experience for people. We can't play youth cricket on soccer pitches. We have to develop our own facilities. So we need to make those investments right away, which is what we're doing at Major League Cricket and why we're raising tens of millions of dollars to do that. So we're incentivized right away to create the right type of facilities and stadiums. So as an example, we're building a Major League Cricket stadium in Dallas. It's a conversion of an old minor league cricket stadium, baseball stadium, sorry. And that will become a cricket-specific facility. So we're going to be playing in something appropriate for us. It's going to be 7,000-8,000 seats. So we're not going to be playing in some massive empty venue. It's going to be a good size. We can expand, the amount of spectators if we need to for a bigger match. But it means we're investing in the right kind of facilities from the beginning, which I think is really important. The other thing that we have a massive advantage in over MLS is we can bring the world's best cricketers to play in Major League Cricket. Which Major League Soccer, frankly, can't for the most part. Now and then they may sign a big star like, Ibra or Beckham or, David Villa or whoever at the tail end of their career, and they'll come here and play for a couple of years, or they may get lucky with a younger player who's a star and plays here for a bit. But for the most part, you're not seeing the world's best soccer in MLS. It's just a fact until they can compete with the Premier League and, La Liga, et cetera. That's just going to be the case because in soccer, obviously, players are signed year-round to their clubs and they're not going to come to the US and play competitive soccer for 3 months. In Major League Cricket's case, we will be able to do that. We'll be, one of the premier T20 franchise leagues, and we'll be able to have a lot of the world's best cricketers. So that will allow us to appeal to the fans of cricket who love cricket, who live here, who watch the IPL, who watch the CPL, whatever it may be. And now they'll be able to see that level of cricket in their backyard. And MLS has always had this problem and continues to have this problem that there are lots more fans of soccer who will tune in on TV and watch the Premier League, but will frankly have a bit of snobbery, which I don't agree with because I like MLS and I'm a big fan. But they'll have a bit of snobbery and they won't go and watch their local MLS team because it's not the same quality or the same players as they watch on TV. In our case, it might not be the IPL, but we're not going to be that far off. And we're going to have world-class players playing here. So we have an advantage in that sense over Major League Rugby or Major League Soccer or really any of the other international sports, because of the way cricket happens to be set up, that the players now are rotating around leagues and able to come and play. And if we can find the right window in the calendar for international cricket, we'll be able to get a lot of those world-class players here. So it's a very interesting question. Sorry, that was a long answer, but
no, brilliant.
Some of the things are quite flipped versus soccer, but probably the most important thing that is true is that what we've been able to do is look at what soccer has done well and learn from it and see where it makes sense to make investments and create a feeling and a story around our league that feels authentic both to fans of cricket and to explain it to new audiences for cricket as well. And soccer has worked in cities where it's felt authentic both to fans of international soccer, but also feels local and real to new fans of the sport. You look at some of the teams that have done well in the last few years in MLS and are filling their stadiums. They've got that feeling, and that's what we want for our Major League Cricket teams as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you just made that last point because this isn't a soccer pod, but you know what? I'm a football fan, so I'm glad you made that point because you look at like recent expansion teams in MLS, like the Timbers, and even the new one this year, Austin. I can't remember their second.
Austin FC, yeah.
That's it. They're packing it out.
They're
packing their stadiums out. Every Seattle Sounders did the same when they expanded
Atlanta as well.
Yeah, so it's. I get what you mean when you're saying there are things to learn from MLS for sure. But we're 20 odd minutes in, and believe it or not, we still haven't actually explained what Major League Cricket is. So what I'm going to ask you to do at this stage, because like I say, some of you listening, watching, you'll already have some inkling. But this next section is for those of you who are like, so what actually is Major League Cricket? And this, you're probably going to have to talk for a bit here, Tom. So, because in explaining it, I don't think you can explain it without also explaining minor league cricket at the exact same time. So I don't know how you're going to do it. I don't know how. I don't know how you're going to briefly explain it, or. But I'm giving you all the time in the world. But do go into as much depth as you see necessary for people to fully understand the both the minor league process versus what the major league process is going to look like for 2023, I believe. So the floor's all yours.
Yeah. Well, I will try not to take up the rest of the pod with it, but it is really important, to your point, to understand that it is not just one one-off tournament that will take place each year. It's part of a much larger structure of Major League Cricket, minor league cricket, and a partnership with USA Cricket that we have. So it's the most fundamental thing is, so I work for, sorry, wrong side of my chest. I work for Major League Cricket. We are a private entity that has started up a commercial entity that's launching Major League Cricket. That has launched minor league cricket, that has other ventures as well, including the academies that I mentioned. And we're essentially the commercial partner of USA Cricket, which is the governing body of cricket, like the ECB, for example. And we are partnered with them in the sense that we are the exclusive sanctioned body to run a top tier, world-class franchise short form T20 league, or if it ends up being the 110 years, I don't know, or the 90 or the 30, who knows. But we have the exclusive rights to that top tier professional league in the US. And in return for those rights, we are required and are committed to investing in the sport, into building cricket stadiums, into supporting the growth of the USA national teams, into supporting the development of pathways to those national teams and to Major League Cricket with minor league structure and other tournaments and other youth programs that will help put in place as well. So it was very important for USA Cricket when they gave this license, that they didn't just give it to the first partner who came along and said we can all make a bunch of money from doing this one-off competition every year. It was very important for everybody that the commitment was to build the sport as a whole, to make massive infrastructure investments, to invest in youth development, coaches, bring professional players over here to seed the game, and provide a base from which the rest of the sport can develop from. And that's what Major League Cricket is committed to doing. And personally, that's what interested me to go and work for Major League Cricket. That we weren't just going to be a one-off 2-month tournament every year where we bring a few great players over and have some matches in baseball stadiums and call it a day. It's a much bigger commitment we've made than that. And every day, I'm here now in Florida with the US national team, and our team's helping put this event together because it's really important for the growth of the sport. And we also do have a commercial arrangement with the USA national team where we have some commercial rights to them in the long run too. So that again only increases the incentives for us to invest in the USA national team and get that team to a level where we can host more full member tours like we are with Ireland at the moment, and get some of the other full member nations over to the US in the future. So there's a lot of layers to that. So if you just think of it sort of as a pyramid, we're investing in the academies and the development process at the sort of grassroots youth level. We're laying into that infrastructure developments, whether that's developing first-class training facilities with 5, 6, 7 pitches where we can host both youth tournaments as well as training camps for the US national teams, both the U19s and the full teams. So investing in those type of facilities around the country, which we're doing at the moment. We announced a couple last year, including Atlanta as a new one. So investing in those, because obviously this is a massive country, right? We can't just build one training facility and call it a day, because that's not going to serve.
Can I jump in there 1 sec?
Yeah.
Funny enough, I was literally writing that down as you were talking, because I know there's the cricket specific stadium being built in Texas. But that's the weird thing about the States. Like, you've got to have one for the Eastern zone, the Western zone. So what are what's going forward? What's the plan for like the central hubs per zone of America, if you catch my drift.
Yeah. So certainly we're thinking that way. Some of it's a mix of what I would call strategic planning and opportunity, being opportunistic as well. Because in the case of the Dallas Stadium, for example, we probably didn't plot. I wasn't there when it was all plotted out 4 or 5 years ago to begin with, but probably didn't plot Dallas as the first Major League Cricket stadium location necessarily. But we knew that Texas would be a strong market for cricket because of the immigration patterns there, and knowing there were a lot of cricket fans in that area. And then we had the opportunity to go in with a stadium where a minor league cricket team, baseball team, let's keep doing that. Minor league baseball team couldn't play any longer, and they had a nice new stadium built only in 2005, I think, that was going to sit empty, and we could convert it into a cricket stadium and make the investment to do that. So it's a mix of knowing we need to be in those key regional areas, and then seeing what's the right opportunity, either to build something from the ground up or take an existing facility and improve it. Another great example is North Carolina, which again probably isn't the first place that comes to mind when you think of a cricket hotspot in America, but it does have a very large cricket loving fan base there. Again, a lot of South Asian immigrants in that area, with a big sort of tech biomedical complex around the Charlotte, and then the triangle of Durham and Raleigh and Chapel Hill. So there was actually a pretty good population there that started playing cricket, and a community in Morrisville, which is right in the middle of that triangle, started playing cricket regularly at a pitch that the town of Morrisville invested in, turned it into a very nice, proper cricket pitch, proper grass. It's a lovely setting with trees in the background. And we hosted the minor league finals there last year. We brought in a lovely setup with 14 cameras, a good broadcast, and we had about 2,000 or 3,000 people out to watch it.
Because I watched that, and the attendance was healthy. And for those who haven't seen, I think there's a highlights package of it on the Major League website. It's definitely worth a watch, because it immediately puts to bed the idea that some people might have of, but who would go to the matches? And that final was heavily well attended, with people clearly caring who was going to win, and so on.
And in fact, that was really impressive, because neither team was from that area, right? They were they're from the West Coast and New York area, so it wasn't as if there was a local interest either. But fans were passionate; they just loved getting out and watching good quality cricket. So that area is one we're going to invest in. We're going to invest and make some improvements to that venue, and that will be a venue that will be capable in the future of if we finalize the agreements, which we're in the process of now with the town and the city and the state. That venue will be upgraded. It'll be able to host professional cricket, Major League Cricket matches, even World Cup matches potentially in 2024. So again, it's seeing where there's organic support, where towns might want to invest in a sport that they know that their demographics and population are really going to appreciate. Because Morrisville probably could have built another baseball diamond or something, but they saw that 40-50% of their community is now from South Asian diaspora, and they're playing cricket and they love cricket. So they want to provide parks and rec facilities that support the community that lives there. So they invested in cricket, and we can now be a resource that can come in and invest private funds into supporting that growth as well. So it's where we can make those partnerships that make a lot of sense. At the Major League Cricket level, we're obviously looking at the bigger urban areas to place our teams. So, West Coast, certainly Southern California, the Bay Area, Seattle, those again areas with both massive populations, but massive cricket-loving populations. The Northeast, New York area, DC, Philly are all very strong for us. Here in Southern Florida, there's already a cricket stadium, which is fantastic. A big Caribbean population down here, of course. And then in the Midwest, where I live, Chicago has a massive South Asian population, and most of the bigger cities, have solid cricket demographics right now as well. So we do need to be regional, and I already mentioned Atlanta and Texas as well. So we do need to be regional and really intentional in where we go, but it also needs to be where it makes sense. We don't want to, just go and get a cheap piece of land in the middle of nowhere. and do it that way, because it will make it hard for people to go to, hard for people to train at. So we want to find good locations that make sense and make it easy to attend and support the growth of the sport. And that will, the goal being, when Major League Cricket launches in 2023, and I should probably give the 20-second overview of what that actually is. So that'll be a 6-team league when it launches in 2023. It'll be very much like the other, top T20 leagues, where you'll have a mix of domestic players along with, call it 4 or 5 overseas, world-class stars that will come in for each of those 6 teams. We've already announced that the Knight Riders are part of our investment group for Major League Cricket. So you can imagine that they will have a team as well in there. And then we'll have 5 other individual franchise owners as well that will have teams or be part of Major League Cricket and operate teams. So the locations we haven't announced specifically yet, but you can kind of guess them relatively easily for the most part, based on the big cities that I mentioned. We won't have 6 stadiums to play in right away. We'll have probably 3 or 4. So we'll have to rotate around to begin with, but the goal is to have a stadium in each location in the next few years. And then that's really going to help accelerate everything towards the World Cup in 2024 as well. So if you think of it, as we launch minor league cricket in 2021, we obviously bring back minor league cricket in 22. The US team's getting even more active in 22. So another big year for us. Then Major League Cricket launches in 23, World Cup in 24. More stadiums coming online, 25, 26, and then potentially cricket in the Olympics in LA in 28, TBD, but certainly a possibility still there. So you see, by the end of the decade, that continued growth, the US national team gets stronger and stronger, and hopefully we can get to full member status, at least for the shorter forms of the game by the end of the decade. So there's a beautiful.
I was going to say the story, narrative, and arc.
It's great. It's great.
Written. But do you know what? And this sounds like a little point, but I'm actually being serious when I say it. One of the beauties of American sports in general, and actually, do you know what? I'd actually say that American sports stadiums in general, they make. I don't think anyone quite does it like the Americans. Going to a sports arena is as much about being in the arena as it is about watching the sport. So the last time I was in the States, I watched Minnesota Twins. It was Minnesota Twins. I don't even know who they were playing. Now, obviously, baseball can be a very long game.
Yes, yeah.
Depending on what just happens to be going on in that particular game. But being in the Twins stadium was just as exciting as whatever was going on the pitch. And I just wonder if that's going to also, because that's an Americanism for me, about you go to the sports arena for an experience. And to make a parallel, I was recently at Tottenham Hotspur's stadium. I went to a game recently, and someone had told me that actually Tottenham had spent a lot of time, the designers behind that stadium had spent a lot of time in the States looking at what makes the experience in the States the way it is. And apparently, could be wrong, but I was told that stadium was very much built with the American model in mind of how you should build stadiums and the experience you're providing for fans. So I've brought that up because is that in mind for the cricket stadiums? But also, when MLC kicks off, will it still have the Americanisms that you see in other sports of like All-Star Week? And do you get what I'm coming from? Because that's so quintessentially American. To that, I don't know how that ties into crickets per se, but I think it would be a shame to lose those kind of quintessential American things that you see across all of their sports that no one else has really tried yet in cricket, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, no, those are both really good points. And I think that's one of the fascinating things about developing a sport here is that you have the opportunity to bring some of the best things of the sport globally that make it what it is, obviously. And we don't want to disregard, what makes cricket special, or when you're in soccer, what makes soccer special. You don't want to go too far and over-Americanize it, which MLS probably tried too hard to Americanize soccer in the 90s and reeled it back and got a little bit more authentic to international soccer and was more successful when it did that. But MLS has also kept some of the good parts that you mentioned, like, good stadium experiences and the type of treatment that you generally get that when you grow up. I mean, I grew up going to English football in the late 80s, early 90s, and it was not a very fan-friendly experience, to say the least. It's very different here. So we do want to keep that best of American hospitality and experience and food and beverage and, music and entertainment that you can build around it that makes it a good experience and, makes it fan-friendly and the fan-first. So we definitely want to keep those parts, but we also want to keep what's authentic and true to cricket. Or when I worked in soccer, those things are important not to lose sight of as well. But I think what's funny about cricket is it's so different in different parts of the world now, right? Like when a typical American probably thinks of cricket, probably what they think of first in their head anyway, if they're not an expat, is sort of that stuffy 19th century British, all whites. Game takes 19 years to play. You have to have a top hat and a big moustache to be interested in it. But that's not really what cricket is today, right? Cricket is a global sport. With cricket in the Caribbean is very different from cricket in England or Australia, and the IPL is different than all of them. They all have their unique experiences and cultural parts to them. But America can sort of bring pieces of those together. We have to be careful with it, but we know we can have audiences that love the IPL, that love the CPL, that love English cricket, and we need to find the best way to bring the parts of those that make sense to this and sort of mold together American entertainment, American sports experience with some of those fun parts of, the Bollywood celebrity of the IPL and the razzmatazz, or the color and the fun of the CPL, or the authenticity, if you like, of sort of tradition that might come with an English spin on it as well. So there's all different ways we can go, and I think you'll see teams in different places probably embrace different parts of that as well. The other interesting thing here is cricket's going to be very different in different parts of the country, both as experiences, because the audiences will be different depending on demographics in different parts of the country. Cricket itself is going to be different in different parts of the country because of the wild variety of weather and soil and other conditions we have here. That's going to be a really fascinating part of the sport's development over the next 10 years as well, because it's such a big, varied country. So we're going to see that nuance to it. But how we pull that together into what is American cricket, right? That there's no answer to that right now. Yeah. That's the question we're asking at Major League Cricket, that we're actively thinking about and talking to fans about, and thinking about what should the spirit of American cricket look like. We don't want to just copy wholesale any of the other franchise leagues, or we want it to feel real and to have an American dimension to it as well. So how do we fit those things together and make it something fun? And I'm sure it will change. The idea I have in my head now might not be where we are in 5-10 years, but if we can get 70-80% of it right when we launch, and then modify and learn and see what's working well. That's what MLS ultimately did do well. They saw where it was working well, and teams took those playbooks. Atlanta came in and looked at what had started to work in Toronto or Seattle and took it to even another level. So if we can be smart and our teams can be smart and do that, then I think the sky is the limit as we grow the sport and have expansion around the country as well, and add new teams that can take those best ways of doing it and put new spins on it. What we will have is the investment to do it well, which is important too, that it's not going to be a 2-bit league. We're talking with world-class investors who want to do this the right way and do the sport the right way. So that's important as well, because if you try to launch a new league or sport in the US and you don't do it with serious investment, it's just not going to work, because the sports and entertainment scene here is so advanced, so competitive, and there's so much to do that you've got to do it well and have a unique selling point and a unique way of reaching people. So we need to do it well to get to that level.
Yeah, do you know what? That's a brilliant point you've just raised there, because I think sometimes there can be a misnomer from outwards looking into the States that, states basically, you do anything in the sport, and because of the size of the population and because of how sports perceived in the States, it's just going to do well. And when you said you've got to do it well, I suddenly had in mind, someone will be like, I can't believe you're bringing this up as an example, but it is what it is. I suddenly had in mind Vince McMahon tried to do an offshoot of American football with the XFL. And that lasted what? How many seasons did he get out of it? Two or three before it imploded on itself. So it is, and the reason some people listening going, oh my God, you use Vince McMahon as an example, but the point I'm using there is it's not as simple as just, I'm going to start this new thing and I've got all these grandiose ideas and that's just it. There does have to, with XFL, he didn't, well, there's lots of reasons why XFL fell, but you do have to tap into your market. You do need to actually have a longevity plan in place, and that kind of flopped as soon as it started. In all essence, but something that I do want you to just delve in a bit more on as well, because you've been very thorough on Major League Cricket, but minor league has actually started. Minor league, we had the first edition of minor league cricket this year, and as we alluded to it with the final, which was very successful. I think it was the Stallions. I think they were the team that won it.
Strikers.
Strikers, not Stallions, but Strikers. I'll give a tiny bit of an intro, but want you to actually explain it properly. Like, there's 27 teams across the East, the West, the Central. I'm missing someone out, North maybe. And they played across X number of weeks, possibly 10 leading into the finals. But what was interesting to me, again, from an outside perspective looking in, is there were loads of teams. Obviously, the States is massive, but there were loads of teams. There were like 27 teams across the different conferences. I had a massive interest in it because there were tons of Caribbean players in it, from some of our internationals all the way through to some of our kind of like established regional players. So like Rodman Powell was in the final, I believe. Just bringing out some other random names that would have been there. Christopher Barnwell, I think, was one of the best performances across the whole the whole tournament. I should speak of. Tajnarine Chandapur was there. Shiv Sun was there. Kanar Lewis, who is on our radar for possible West Indies selection. He was there. So there were loads of West Indians there, and that's why I was keeping a keen eye on what was going on. So I was like, well, this must be a serious thing, because granted, I should give this context. We haven't got a lot of cricket going on in the Caribbean right now, so it was a perfect way for West Indian players to also make some money. And I assume that a lot of them would have gone over as the pro for their particular team. Quite a few of them. Like Rodman, for example, must have been the pro for his team, for example. But how does that system work? Which is actually my question. So, I guess I want you to explain the system in general, but then also explain, like, do you know what? Just explain it. My questions will come after you've explained it properly.
So you got the basics, definitely. So we had about 200 matches over 10 weeks, 27 teams, 21 cities around this very large country. Most of these teams, think of them as, many of them might have been a successful club in their area in club cricket, and the owners have, added some investors or something like that, and they're pulling it up to another level with minor league cricket, where we ask them all to have a minimum level of investment in the team throughout the year to make sure there are match fees paid and travel and all of that, and that. But not only are they going to bring in some of the good, semi-pro players in the area, but they're also required to have young players on the roster as well. Because again, we see it ultimately as a very important pathway to develop players for both the US national team and for Major League Cricket, to help seed the domestic base of cricket. So it was important that the young players got the chance to play and learn from those pro players. To be honest, what was extraordinary was the volume and the quality. And mixing those two was a challenge, because no one had ever done this before. It was by far the most extensive cricket competition to ever take place in the US. No one had done a competition on this scale before. It was the first real national T20 competition. And to do it over 10 weeks, 200 matches, we live streamed, I think, all but one of them as well. So fans are able to watch them. Some teams started to get some nice attendance as well. It's going to take a while to grow that. We're realistic about that. None of these teams have massive marketing budgets, or the facilities are very varied. Some are playing in nice cricket facilities like in Morrisville and here in Florida, and others are playing in frankly municipal parks where we've add some facilities around it. So it's very mixed. Some are natural turf wickets, and some of them are artificial. But all teams are required to be on natural grass turf within 3 years. So that's very important too, because that'll help the quality of the cricket grow enormously as we see more natural grass or potentially hybrid pitches, which is a good new technology that's coming in, come into place. So that again is all part of this strategy to grow the level of grassroots facilities and play and have that consistent competition. So American cricket has long had sort of one-off weekend tournaments that take place where a lot of Caribbean players come and play in that, and they can make a bit of money, and it's good quality cricket. And I'm sure it's certainly an important part of cricket here, but you can't really develop players consistently through that. By having a 10-week competition culminating in a finals with prize money that build that's relatively good, you incentivize higher quality coaching, better umpiring, better equipment, better facilities, and that's only going to grow. We frankly did all this quite quickly. The pandemic was a big challenge, so it led to a lot of uncertainty and challenges, obviously, as with everything. Now we've got through the first season, we're able to take a breath, improve again next year, and keep improving that minor league so that it becomes more and more a development path. And another interesting point is, after the season, we heard from a lot of potential minor league teams who want to join from other parts of the country too, where they might be building a cricket pitch, and I think they could be a good host for it. We're not going to jump in and expand massively right away, because we don't want to do more than we can manage effectively. But again, they could become part of a system where we have development tournaments or other competitions that take place throughout the year as well. So we're looking to continue to expand the footprint of quality cricket. That's ultimately what it's about. And honestly, I didn't know what to expect on the level of play when I came in, and I was pretty surprised and impressed with the quality of a lot of the cricket. You're talking about professional players who come in, and the standard's good. There are a lot of very, very good semi-pro players here. There's a really talented crop of under-19 players in the US who have come through some of these academies, who are getting good training in indoor facilities and getting good development now. And so the standard of cricket was very, very good, and continued to improve as the season went on too. And we brought in more players that continue to be added to the league. So it's something that's appealing to play in. It's fun to watch, frankly. There was just so much of it, and you could watch all of it on YouTube. And there was just, there was some cracking T20 matches that were just, really entertaining, and people enjoyed that. And ultimately, that's what we're here for, right? It's sport, it's fun. We're supposed to enjoy watching it and appreciate it. So, as we grow, we want more and more fans to be able to support their local team and get out there. We have to continue to do what we can to help teams grow in their communities and grow their footprints and develop fan bases, because Major League Cricket's only going to reach six markets locally to begin with. Minor League Cricket is a way we can have a sort of web across the nation and have a footprint in many, many cities, and that's really important too. Same thing we've seen in soccer, that it's not just about where MLS is, where the successful lower league teams are really important too, because I live in Indianapolis, city of 1 million people. We don't have an MLS team, but we have a USL Championship team that we're very proud of, and that's important, that we don't just focus only on the major league city locations, but that we develop cricket all across the country. So it's a really important sort of midpoint on that pyramid to Major League Cricket from the grassroots.
And again, fantastic that you've mentioned that point at the end, Tom, because again, depending on who's watching, listening, and your understanding of American sports, and you just use the USL as an example, it is possible in the States to, I guess, so you can be a minor league team and have I guess let's say 3-4 years from now, right? And you're a very successful, well-run minor league club that produces quality players that I guess the major league cricket teams keep an eye on and then draft them when the time comes for
Yep.
major league cricket. So it's not about, because sometimes I think people get confused in the US because the US doesn't really believe in promotion and relegation and, and things like that. But I guess using MLS and USL as an example, you can be a USL. Austin were a USL team before they became an MLS expansion side. Would that be right to use or?
I don't think Austin was, but
No,
Minnesota's a good example.
Well, Cincinnati won as well.
Cincinnati was too. Yeah,
right,
many of them have been. Yeah, and it's a great proving ground, right?
Yeah,
you show you have a fan base, you show you've got player development, and then you have the opportunity. And we're only starting with 6 teams, and it's a big country, so there's a lot of room in the future for expansion at the major league level too. But you can also just be a successful independent, minor league cricket team and have a great fan base, have a great academy structure, find a way to make it work, be fiscally responsible. Youth development can be a good way to to fund some of your other programs. You can have players who are coaches, for example. If you pay players to coach, you can build that into their structure to play for your minor league team as well. So there's different ways to make it work, and great opportunity because people do want their kids to succeed, and they want opportunities to play and get good coaching. So you can build that into the playing piece too, especially for players who are maybe coming towards the end of their career, that they can come here, play minor league cricket, coach, and then develop in the future as a coach of a minor league team.
Now, in the future, and because obviously Major League Cricket is, like you say, in partnership with USA Cricket. Now, in the future, the hope for USA Cricket is undoubtedly to get to a point. And again, I keep making comparisons to soccer, but that's the best thing I know, is to get to a point where they have homegrown stars. So let's say USA get their full member status by 2030 or before, but they get full member status. The ideal is that USA Cricket has a Christian Pulisic of their own, for example, who's come up through the academy system, along with all the other youngsters. Everyone always says Christian Pulisic, like there aren't a whole heap of others. But you catch my drift. So they have a whole heap of homegrown stars who have essentially come up through established academy systems and so on and so forth. But before we get to that stage, and this is where I have my Caribbean hat on now, there are starting to be players putting their hat in, so to speak, with US cricket. So the most recent Caribbean name I'll pluck out my head was Nassim Dianarine, who played in the minor league. In fact, he was in the final. I think he was in the final. So Nassim Dianarine, previously capped by the West Indies, no longer picked by the West Indies by about 2011-12, about 37 now, I think he would be. He's gone into the minor league system. Probably a strong chance that he gets a major league draft because he's in the States, etc. I think you probably have to answer this question sensitively. So I don't know what you're going to say, but how much tapping into the Caribbean market, because it's the most obvious market to tap into, because the two regions are right next to each other. How much of the tapping into the Caribbean market can Major League Cricket do? Because if I'm an established Caribbean cricketer, not even established, sorry, if I'm an up-and-coming, exciting Caribbean cricketer, I'm looking across at Major League Cricket thinking, I hope I get drafted, but also the minor league cricket system, because it's a regular form of good standard cricket. Granted, it's T20, but that's the way the world's going round right now with regards to cricket. And it's, in fairness, I shouldn't just say the Caribbean, because in the minor league iteration this year, you had players come across from South Africa, Pakistan. So it wasn't. It's wrong for me to just say the Caribbean, but I'm talking about geographical proximity here. We're in a global market here. Any expansion brand is going to be a threat understand that when I say threat, it's with my West Indies hat on.
Yeah, no,
Any expansion brand is going to be a threat in the market, but it's also an opportunity. That's the reality of global economics, surely.
yeah, it's a tricky one, and to your point, I'm going to be careful what I say.
Yeah, I was going to say, tread carefully on this one.
I think there are a couple of ways to look at it. On the one hand, there are certainly going to be players that are going to come here and play that does mean they're leaving the country where they played in previously. Obviously, there's no point hiding that. It's happening, and that happens in sport, right? It's just part of world sport that's what takes place. But I do think there's a reason the West Indies were happy to co-host the World Cup with the US in 2024. So if the West Indies, really saw the US as a threat that is going to somehow, sabotage Caribbean cricket, it wouldn't make sense to host a massive tournament with the US that's going to grow the sport enormously. Here, I think we all see that we can grow the sport in this region as a whole, and it could actually be real advantages for both regions. Clearly, we can learn a lot and do a lot with West Indies cricket as a nation that doesn't have the history or the knowledge or the resources that the West Indies has traditionally had. But the US, I think, can help grow the sport here. We're seeing Ireland here right now, who are then going to go play in the West Indies.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So we're going to see increasingly there'll be opportunities that make sense for countries to come here and tour and spend more time in this region, which is great for everybody. The same could be true of competitions where, like the World Cup, where there are matches in both regions as well. And from a player development standpoint, yes, maybe some younger players will come over here, but they're not all ultimately necessarily going to play for the US either, just as not all players that go to Europe, American players that go to Europe in soccer, they'll often come back and play for the US national team, right? So we're just providing more good facilities, more good training opportunities, more good competition in the region that they don't have to travel now to England, or to Australia or somewhere else to do it. So it's it's much easier in that sense to hop around and do that. And as it's very common for a lot of people from the Caribbean here to have family and be able to come visit and stay for a couple of months. And a lot of people doing that right now in cricket and playing in some local leagues and things. And now they'll just be able to do it at another level and get a better experience, a better level of play, and then take that back home. So I'm sure it'll be a mix, but hopefully what we're doing is making the whole pie in this region bigger, and that's better for everybody. I'm sure there'll be some give and take over the years. That's just inevitable in competitive international sport. But I think overall it's good for cricket in this region. But I would say that.
Listen, it's an excellent balanced response. And at the end of the day, though, but I have to echo your point, because it's not too dissimilar to, okay, a West Indian cricketer gets a young West Indian cricketer gets a deal in the IPL. Let's say they go there, they don't play any games, but they learn from that experience. So similarly, a young American player plays in minor league cricket and they get to share a dressing room with, let me think of somebody who would go across, Ruston Chase. They're learning from the fact that they are able to be in the nets and train. So yeah, you are actually right. It is a bit of a give and a take there. There's pros to it from both sides of the coin. And actually, that if I spoke to a West Indian player, I would say that their response to me would be, it's another opportunity for me to earn a living. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah,
so actually, that's the reality of the situation. But listen, Tom, this has been fascinating, and I've got one final question for you around this, because I want to get in, because I've forgotten to say it earlier on. At the end of the day, you also work specifically with a view on marketing, and that's the part I'm intrigued about. Okay, so West Indies have been over to, and India. In fact, lots of teams have, but I'm going to focus on West Indies. We've been over to the States to play games in the past, in Florida, where you are right now, which is where Ireland, USA is going to be. I've heard, pick my words carefully here. How easy is it to market cricket? Because I guess the reason why I'm answering that question is there's been times where we've gone to Florida and it's been really good. And the crowds reflect that. There's been times where some people have said to me it's a bit muggy and a bit sticky down in Florida. It's too humid. That's nothing to do with That's not America's fault. I'm just just saying that it's a bit muggy, it's a bit humid, etc. How easy, and this is a journey, obviously. You've already explained that this is a long journey Major League Cricket's on, but do you get where I'm going? I don't even know what I'm actually trying to say.
No,
How easy is the marketing process?
Yeah, no, I think I see where you're coming from, and so far, we've only had really one, professional class stadium here in southern Florida to test the waters with, and it's certainly we've had some great events here, and there's been some where it's been more of a challenge when it's 95 degrees and massively humid, and they're playing in the middle of the day. There's a reason Florida baseball teams have struggled in those situations in the past too. So it's that there are some unique challenges to that, but I think that's part of the reason why we're building other infrastructure. Not that we're not going to have big matches in Florida. Will obviously that'll continue to happen because it's a great venue and a great community around here too. But by having venues all around the country, we can time things seasonally and play in optimal times of the day and times of the year in different parts of the country. And we're very fortunate that we can play pretty much year round here in the US, in different parts of the country as well, and then spread that love around so that you're not going back to the same place over and over again for cricket, so that when it comes to your region and the US national team plays there, it's a big deal. That's what happens with the men's team in soccer and the women's team in soccer right now. They rotate around the country. And when they go to Cincinnati for the first time or Minnesota or wherever it is, it's a big deal in those cities and those communities because they're not seeing the national team play that often. And if we can do the same with cricket and rotate around, and obviously we'll have different touring countries that will come and they'll have different appeals in different parts of the nation too. So that'll be a factor. But it's also being strategic, again, about where we build those facilities, making sure they are accessible in sort of the heart of communities that love cricket now, as well as potential future audiences for cricket. Again, we don't want to build somewhere in the middle of nowhere that's nowhere near anyone that loves cricket, even though it might be a lot cheaper to do that. That wouldn't make much sense. So we're looking at good locations in big cities that have big cricket-loving populations, but also big event-going, sports-loving audiences that could embrace the sport too. So how we then pitch the sport so that it appeals both to people that love cricket already, so that your expats, like me, would get interested, but also it's maybe your 27-year-old American-born fan of soccer, or maybe they're even more into esports now or something. I don't know, but they're not necessarily your traditional 60-year-old baseball fan. We don't necessarily think we can convert a lot of seniors to love cricket. That's maybe not realistic. But the younger generations who are interested in sort of global, sort of part of the global community, if you like, because of where we are in the world now. They are interested in things outside of the norm, outside of the traditional three sports, and they're following soccer or following other sports online, and they're living on their phone. And we need to find ways to appeal to them and bring the sport to them and intrigue them. One good example, just recently, there's a big baseball sort of influencer who does explainer videos called John Boy. He's got about 1.5 million followers on YouTube alone, and he does these great baseball explainers. He's funny, interesting. He's not a traditional marketing piece for baseball, but he's built an audience around explaining the game in unique ways. He's discovered cricket. He spent some time in Australia when he was younger and knew what cricket was, but he's, at least as John Boy on his channel, he's discovered cricket recently and he's doing these really cool explainer videos of what cricket is, or taking a moment and showcasing it. And he's posting that, and hundreds of thousands of American fans of his, who are probably mostly younger fans of baseball, are now watching that and starting to understand it. So if we can find avenues like that to reach those audiences in different ways, I'd rather figure out, a content plan with a John Boy or someone like that and spend some money there and do it really well than put up 50 billboards or put up, do 20 ads on Fox TV or something. Because we can reach people in an explanatory way that engages them and introduces the sport to them in a fun, interesting way. That's what I think people are looking for now. They don't want to just be, spoon-fed and told what to do. They want to understand it and experience it and have it be a link to another part of the world that they don't yet know. So we can do that and find new audiences that way, and also serve the existing audience of cricket by delivering them ultimately really good cricket. I think sometimes as a marketer, you can lose sight of that and think it's all about what your tagline is and get really excited about it. But at the end of the day, if we deliver world-class cricket in good venues, the amount of people that love cricket here, I believe they'll come out and watch that and experience it. I think we've seen that with soccer. When you get it right and you do it well in a good venue and it's good soccer, people will come out. We can deliver world-class cricket in good venues, cricket-specific venues, and I think there's the audience there to come out and see that. And they'll bring their friends, and word will spread, like we even saw on that small scale in Morrisville just earlier this year, that when you get it right and it's a fun experience, you'll see a mix of people that love cricket. What I love was walking around. Every time I walked around the venue, and I tried to do that a lot when I'm at events we host, to sort of hear what the buzz and hear what people are talking about, I kept hearing existing fans of the game, usually expats, explaining it to a new fan who had clearly never even seen a cricket ball before. And you heard the same thing over and over again. All the nuances of cricket that we all know are a little tricky to explain sometimes. But it was so good to hear that. And that's just a little microcosm of where I think we could go with the sport over the next 10 years and exponentially grow it from there.
Listen, that's lovely. And all I will say is, if somebody can sit through 5 hours of a baseball game, I am certain they can sit through 3 hours of a T20 game.
It's actually a really good point that I've made. And I don't think we're competing with baseball for the record. I think it's complementary to baseball, and baseball fans can love cricket. But baseball has gotten slower and slower over the last
100%,
3 decades. Whereas cricket has done the opposite. It's got faster and faster, and the ball is in play much more than in baseball. Baseball's become very stop-start with the sabermetrics that have come in, and home runs and walks and strikeouts much more frequent than base running and stealing and all of that. Cricket's much more active and 360 degree, obviously. So I think you're absolutely right. Fans that love baseball, they could see cricket and think, well, that's a faster, more exciting sport. So
I can get home in 3 hours. Okay, I'm watching.
So both fans of both can develop in tandem for sure.
Right. Well, listen, Tom, as I said, I hope for those who have been listening, I hope you found that super informative. I know I have. I personally can't wait for 2023 when it all kicks off for Major League Cricket. But for those of you who also have had your interest piqued by this particular episode, do lock in, go to the Major League Cricket website, but lock in for minor league cricket, which will be happening in 2022 around June-ish time? June?
Yeah, we'll probably start late June next year, I think.
Yeah, so lock in for that, people, because again, if you're a fan of the West Indies, you will see lots of West Indian cricketers involved in that. But it's not even specifically West Indians. You'll see cricketers from all over the globe, and of course, American cricketers themselves as well. So, and this year it was all over YouTube, so it's not like it's something that's not accessible to watch if you're not in the States. So do lock in and follow the journey with Major League Cricket. Tom, just want to say thank you so much. Been an absolute pleasure coming on. Let's link up again because the story's not over yet. Remember, I said there's a story arc here, so we'll have to link up again as the story continues. And my one piece of marketing advice for when it does all kick off: the number one player one of the teams has to draft. Okay, wherever the Caribbean community is, and whichever team is going to be in whatever is defined as the Caribbean Central area, it has to be Chris Gale, because he will be the number one draw. He's the most known Caribbean player. I presume he'll still be active, even if he will be 43 at the time or whatever he might be. And he's a draw. So that's my one one marketing advice for whichever team is based in the Caribbean. In the Caribbean area in the States, you must pick Chris Gale to get the audiences in.
I'm sure he'll be hitting sixes in his 60s. So definitely, I could see an opportunity there. But what is great is the West Indies has developed so many just awesome players to watch over the last couple of decades in T20, and it's going to be fun to have some of them in Major League Cricket, and there's definitely going to be an audience for that here.
No doubt. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's been episode 54 of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. I hope you loved that one. Enjoy your New Year's celebrations. This should be out before the New Year comes, and we'll see you again in 2022. Thank you and good night.
We rule the cricket world. Now the rule seems coming to an end.